Hello everyone. The following video is all about Venn diagrams. So Venn diagrams are going to be really important to us in chapter 1 because they allow us to organize all the information on a set of values and kind of find a place for where they all go. Sometimes based on the information we're given, there's some area where the two sets overlap. Sometimes there's an area where they don't overlap at all. Sometimes they overlap completely. So this section, we're going to talk about those different things and make sure that we know how to find out how to express those Venn diagrams, and then of course, how to answer questions associated with them. Let me flip this over. Okay, and so this section is going to be all about Venn diagrams. So again, Venn diagrams are going to tell us all the information and how to organize it. The things that we're going to do in this section, we're going to have to identify the certain types of Venn diagrams that I mentioned previously. We're also going to look at the different regions and make sure that we're able to describe them. So if I give you a picture of a Venn diagram and I label certain regions of that Venn diagram, it's going to be really important that you're able to just kind of say, okay, I have a description for this region, I have a description for this region, and so on. And then lastly, we're going to use Venn diagrams to display categorical propositions. That's going to be really important when we want to analyze arguments in the next section in 1D. And so we want to make sure that if we're given a categorical proposition, we're able to draw a Venn diagram that expresses that as well. So there's 3 types of Venn diagrams that we're going to be associated with in this class, in this section. Make sure that you're familiar with all 3 of these. The first is called subset. I mentioned that before. A subset is when one set is entirely contained within another. So we could say, I don't know, dogs and chihuahuas. And so the chihuahuas is an entire subset inside of dogs, right? Every single chihuahua is a dog. So if you were to look at it in subset, you would see one group entirely inside of the other, the group of chihuahuas inside of the group of dogs. Another kind of Venn diagram type that we can have is disjoint Venn diagrams. So disjoint Venn diagrams mean they have no overlap at all. So 2 things that have nothing in common or can't both exist at the same time, those values are going to be in 2 separate circles that have no intersection. And then the third one, the one you're probably most familiar with coming into the class, is overlapping Venn diagrams. So they have some sort of an intersection, but they don't have to intersect all the time. So you could be part of both groups, you could be part of one group, you could be part of no groups. That's going to be represented by an overlapping Venn diagram. So let's take a look at what these Venn diagrams look like and get some better examples. This first one here is subset. And so I mentioned before I use chihuahuas and dogs. In this example, I use whales and mammals. And so every whale is a mammal. But there are certainly mammals that are not whales, right? Humans or dogs. Name the animal that's the mammal. And that's why we have 2 circles. One that's much larger that incorporates all of the mammals. And then, of course, this tiny one where whales is. And so this is the example of subset. And next section, when we talk about analyzing arguments, we're going to do pretty much every Venn diagram we draw will be a representation of the subset. Then we have disjoint. So the 2 different sets that I use for disjoint Venn diagram are fish and mammals, because there's no intersection. No fish are mammals. And so you can see here that the 2 sets are unique. They don't have any overlap. There are places where if you're not a fish and you're not a mammal, where you go, that's going to be on the outside of those 2 circles. So there's really 3 regions in this Venn diagram. We have the region where there's fish, we have the region where there's mammals, and then we have this 3rd region outside of the Venn diagram that's neither fish nor mammal. So make sure that you're always considering that extra region that's out here, okay? A 3rd type of Venn diagram, we're going to talk about overlapping. And again, this is the one you're probably most familiar with. And so I use the Venn diagram of doctors and women. And so we can see that doctors is its own set over here, that we have women is its own set. And then of course we have this intersection area in between the 2 where women doctors go, right? So if you're on the outside here, you're let me get the pointer. So if you're on the outside here in this doctors region, you are represented as a doctor, but you are not inside of the women's circle. So this would be doctors who are men. This group over here in this circle, this is the women's circle, but notice that we're not inside of the doctor circle. If we want to describe this, we would say this is the group of women who are not doctors. And then lastly, we have this region on the very far outside, which I've gone ahead and labeled. If you are outside of both of these circles, you're not a doctor, you're not a woman. And so we mention this as men who are not doctors. From there, we want to describe the regions of the people in the party. And so when I made this overlapping Venn diagram, and I labeled all 4 of the regions that are described in an overlapping Venn. So for a 2-circle overlapping Venn diagram, we only have these 4 regions available. We want to make sure that we know how to describe all 4 of these. So let's start with the first one, A. So if you're in the set A, we know already that you are freshmen because you're in this circle, this first circle in here on the left. However, you're not in this second circle on the right, the athlete circle. So if we want to describe who you are, the region A, I would mention is freshman, not athlete. Oops. Sorry, I'm getting a new pen today, and I can't wait because this one's not my favorite. If you're in region B, it's the opposite. You're in the athlete circle, but you're not in the freshman circle. And so the description would be something like, you are an athlete, not a freshman. Sorry for the really bad handwriting. I promise they'll get better. Then we go to region C. Region C is in both. It is the freshman circle and it's the athlete circle. And so if you're in that middle area, if you're in region C, you are both freshman and athlete. Supposed to be commas. Lastly, if you're in region D, you're not in the freshman circle, you're not in the athlete circle. And so the description should have not freshman, not athlete. And so you may have a problem like this on a quiz or an exam. This is also a good way to kind of practice for 1D, to get prepared for 1D, because part of what we're going to do in the next section is look at certain statements and build our own Venn diagrams. And so I think being able to describe all the regions is a really good practice to get yourself ready for the next section. So lastly, we want to talk about how we label certain things in a Venn diagram, or how we describe, how we describe certain things in a Venn diagram if it's already labeled for us. And so here we have actually a 3-circle Venn diagram, and it's overlapping. And we can see that the 3 different regions are women, college graduates, and unemployed. And these are all different people at a conference right now. And so we have a couple questions that we want to answer about that. If you would like to stop the video and work on it real quick for yourself and then check your answer, I totally understand. But the 2 questions that are asked, the 2 questions that are asked are, how many people at the conference are unemployed college graduates? And then how many people at the conference are employed women who are not college graduates? So let's start with the first one. The first one asks about unemployed college graduates. And so we know we have this unemployed circle down here. And we have our college graduate circle up at the top. Now, this particular question didn't say anything about women. And so there are actually 2 separate regions that represent the group that we're looking for. If you are unemployed and you're a college graduate, then you are going to be in the unemployed circle and you're going to be in the college grad circle. And there are two separate regions that are in both. This 5 that's in the middle, that is in both the college grad and the unemployment circle. And also this 7 over here is in both the college graduate and the unemployed circle. And so make sure that we add those values together in order to get the total number of people that represent both of those regions. And so in this case, it would be 5 plus 7, which is 12. We have 12 people at the conference who are unemployed college graduates. Then the second question says, how many people at the conference are employed women who are not college graduates? And so now we have 3 separate descriptions for who this person is. If you are employed, you are not going to be in the unemployed. You're not going to be in the unemployment circle if you are employed. So it could have said not unemployed here instead of just saying employed women, but we know that because you're employed, you're not going to be in this circle on the bottom. So anything that's in the circle on the bottom is out. Also, we know that you are not a college graduate, which means you are not allowed to be in this top right circle either. So you are out of there. So really all we have left is this 19 right here and this 6 on the outside. Don't forget about that 6. Sometimes you may have to include it. But in this question, they asked for only women. So we wanted employed, not in the bottom circle. Women, we want to include the top left circle. Not college graduates, we don't include the top right. So you have to be in this inside circle on the top left, but in neither of the other 2 circles, which is just this value here, 19. So there are 19 people at the conference who are employed women who are not college graduates. The last thing we'll talk about is categorical propositions. And so really what that means is I can make a certain statement using all or no or some between 2 objects. And here we wrote S and P. But when I make those descriptions, there's a Venn diagram that represents that. So if I'm using the word all whales are mammals. Then we're looking at the subset case. When we use the word no, then there's no intersection between the 2 sets. We're looking at the disjoint case. When I use the word some, then we're talking about that overlapping case. If we're talking about these 2 things sharing some sort of characteristic, then we're looking at the middle region right here. But if we don't want them to share some characteristic, like some teachers are not men, for example, then we should be having that second region not in the overlap of the 2. That's it for Venn diagrams. If you have more questions, you can reach out to me. Be on the lookout for the next video, which is all about analyzing arguments.